Welcome to the video, everybody. My name is Anbraxas, and we'll be going over Star Wars: The Old Republic, a free-to-play review. Now, this game did used to be subscription-based. It was supposed to be the quote-unquote World of Warcraft killer. I'll admit it, I played it too, and I actually had a blast with this game. It's very unfortunate that their subscriber numbers basically bottomed out. They had well over 100 servers to start with. Now they're down to about 10 high-pop servers. And that's where everyone's been consolidated. Well, this game went free to play on the 15th. I went ahead, took a good look, and I'm making this review for a couple of different reasons. There's probably some people out there who maybe have some bandwidth issues, are restricted by how much bandwidth they're allowed to have. It's a rather large game to download if you're on any kind of bandwidth restriction. So we're doing a review so they know what they're getting into. And then this review is mainly going to be for people who used to play, who no longer play, and may be looking to come back. And even though it's free to play, it is an MMO, so you already know they're going to be hammering you for money left and right. Anywhere they can milk it out of you, that's going to be their intent. So I'm going to be running some PvP in the background. We will be talking about PvP later in the episode. But I want to go ahead and start off with what things have been restricted for free-to-play players. And as you can see, I am actually on my level 43 Jedi Knight. That's about as high as I made it before I actually quit Swtor. So I think the first thing we need to talk about as far as restrictions go is the leveling experience. In any MMORPG, the majority of your experience is spent from going level 1 to whatever the max level is. Your entire leveling experience. Now, Star Wars: The Old Republic saw fit that you should be allowed to level all the way to max level for free because they made a free-to-play model. However, they did put certain restrictions on your leveling experience. The experience itself is actually restricted. But quest rewards are also restricted to subscribers. Certain quest rewards, they won't leave you high and dry without any kind of upgrades going through a zone, but you'll find as you're questing, the majority of the upgrades available for your character personally are actually restricted to subscribers only, which leaves you having to take some other form of currency or compensation for doing the quest. And then the experience itself is actually reduced because they would like you to go buy experience boosters, etc. Now, this isn't like a huge deal, except I do see some underlying problems with it. I went to the second world, which would be the one, like you start on one world, level up, and then you go to another world. So I went to check out the second world where most people end up to see how other people's free-to-play experience was progressing. And what I found was a lot of the new arrivals, the people who are just trying out for the first time, are arriving on that second world about a level under where they should be. While that's not a big issue, it just makes the fights a little bit tougher. They're also missing a lot of the gear they could have gotten, and what I can see already happening is as you progress through the levels, you'll find yourself periodically either having to buy the experience boost or having to stop and grind out mobs or buy gear off the auction house. Which leads me to my next restriction. So other than the leveling experience itself, they've put in a number of other restrictions to also encourage you to buy Cartel Coins or subscribe to the game. One of the main restrictions that I noticed immediately was that all vendors have inflated prices because you're a free-to-play player. As you can see in the lower left corner of the menu as I'm interacting with this vendor, it blatantly tells you that because you are a free-to-play player, items cost more, which is understandable to a degree because they do want you to buy the Cartel Coins, but your character is actually restricted the amount of money that they're allowed to carry, and they're only allowed to carry 300,000 credits, which is actually a relatively small number because it's easy to gain 100,000 credits through your leveling process. Probably every 2 planets you'll acquire about 100,000 credits. Anything that goes over that 300,000 goes into escrow, which you can't even access until you become a subscriber. So once that money goes into escrow, it's gone. This also applies to PvE vendors, PvP vendors, anything that you can spend your Warzone commendations, Valor, etc. and so forth, comes at an inflated price, and there actually is not an option in the Cartel Market to reduce the vendor prices. That's a subscriber only perk. Now, not everything in the game has been completely restricted by money and cartel coins and subscriptions, etc. There's a lot you can do. In fact, while you're out questing, you're still more than welcome to group up with people. You're still allowed to run 5 flashpoints a week. You're allowed to run, I think it's 5 war zones a week. Maybe it's 5 war zones, 3 flashpoints. I can't remember what it is. And then if you're feeling really randy, you can go into the Cartel Market, and you're more than welcome to purchase a week pass, which roughly equates to like $2, somewhere around there, about $2 USD, to be able to go into war zones and flashpoints as much as you want during a week. Alright, so then the last thing we really need to talk about is the Cartel Market, the whole thing that drives the free-to-play experience. And this actually has a lot of current subscribers pretty angry. Current subscribers are granted 500 coins a month, which is roughly the equivalent of a month subscription. If you go out and actually buy coins, it's like $7.99, and I think to get like the next upgrading coins is a month subscription worth, which is like, I think, 2,000 or something like that. Anyhow, what they're angry about is what we're looking at right now. The cartel packages have a chance to have rare items and super rare items, and they're items that subscribers can't even work towards. So they're kind of caught in the same conundrum that everyone else is. They need to buy coins in order to get better gear out of the cartel system, which is a major downfall. Now, you would expect for a free-to-play model, most of the changes would be cosmetic, things you can buy to make your character look better. However, there's a lot of things gated behind this, like unlocking content for the game, unlocking the ability to trade to people, unlocking war zones every week, etc. and so forth. You can bank slots, all kinds of things, and probably one of the most annoying things that's actually gated by the system are your action bars. As you can see underneath the window, I have 2 action bars available to me. There's actually an unlock for 250 coins, which is roughly, I think it's like $3 worth of coins, somewhere around there. But you only unlock 1 action bar at a time, up to a total of 6. And you need at least 4, and you already have 2. So you're going to have to buy that automatically. And then there's things like Valor boosts, unlocking storage for items, stuff like that. Now they've got some really cool things that you can unlock, such as being able to play Sith races as Jedi, or as Republic characters, etc. And then they have unlocks such as like experience boosters, Valor boosters. I think I already said that. They also have color customization locked up in there, and then the ability to hide your helmet is also locked behind the cartel coins. Not to mention there's also various types of armor. Now, while in Swtor armor isn't like a huge deal, you can mod it however you want. The big deal in this cartel market are the crystals. And as you can see, I'm clicking through the crystals. When I go to the next page, I click on this crystal. That gives you 41 expertise, which is a PvP stat, kind of like PvP power from World of Warcraft. And you're able to equip that to a level 35 weapon. Well, that's actually a huge deal, because that's a direct percentage gain, and that's basically buying power, because there's no gems that you can craft yourself and do that. And as you can see, we're looking at the different XP boosters. You can unlock weekly war zones, weekly flashpoints. Medical probes is something that happens when you die. You have a set number of probes as a free-to-play player so that you can resurrect on the spot. And if you don't have those, you have to go back to a medical center, which is basically your last checkpoint. Rather annoying to have to do. As I said before, you can unlock operations, flashpoints, etc. for the entire week. In my honest opinion, if you're going to be doing all that, you may as well buy a subscription, because you're going to end up paying more in cartel coins than the subscription would have cost you during the course of the month, if you're planning on being a heavily active player. This stuff's kind of catered toward casual players that may not play as often. as a subscriber, but if you want to play the game pretty hardcore, you may as well get a subscription because you're not going to save any money using the Cartel Market. Now, there are certain gear restrictions, and I do believe it's any item with with purple letters you cannot equip to your character, which means if you're going to level up free-to-play, you're planning on doing nothing but the free-to-play model, you do not want to progress past the level of 49, because at 50, all PvP and PvE gear is purple letter, and you are not allowed to equip it unless you have the proper authorization for it. I don't believe you can even buy the authorization in the Cartel Market. I think that is a subscriber-only feature. One other thing to note about the action bar situation is you need to unlock your action bars basically because you have way more abilities than you do space. So that's kind of going to be a forced upgrade. You're basically going to be forced to do that. Even if you want to play casually and do your 5 war zones or flashpoints a week, you're probably going to want to go ahead and unlock those extra action bars, etc. So the final thing we're going to be talking about is PvP, and this is probably the biggest area of the game that killed Star Wars: The Old Republic for most people. So now we're going to talk about the PvP. As you know, I'm a huge player versus player kind of person. I play PvP in World of Warcraft. I played competitively in every game I've ever played in. Halo, what have you, I'm a competitive person. And this is where Star Wars: The Old Republic fell short and is still falling short to this very day. This is basically what killed their game. What people seem to be most excited about was being able to be a Jedi and fight their other Jedi friends in battlegrounds, or I'm sorry, quote-unquote war zones. That was what the main draw of this game was. People were very excited for that feature. Unfortunately, BioWare was more excited for people fighting droids, which turned out to be a total flop. Some people did it, but the majority, at least on my server, the majority of the people, you could find them all day, every day, standing around the PvP vendors, queuing up for PvP. Now, one of the big things that killed this game was not balance, because all the classes are relatively balanced around each other. It was the crowd control, because there was no diminishing returns on crowd control. Your character could sit in a crowd control for 10 minutes straight if there was enough characters standing around you that they just had cooldowns available. Now, they did try to resolve this with what they called a quote-unquote resolve bar. The resolve bar fills up depending on how many crowd controls you have sat through. And when you use your crowd control breaker, which is basically a trinket on a 2-minute cooldown, it grants you about 10 seconds of crowd control immunity, which is basically nothing. And unfortunately, PvP is in the same state it was when we left. I was in Ruin Gaming. It was a guild with about 4,000 members. Now, to put this in perspective for BioWare, if they ever actually see this video, that was the equivalent of $60,000 a month you were not listening to when we asked for rated PvP and we asked for diminishing returns on crowd control. That's all they really had to do and add into this game to make the PvP very compelling and very fun. Unfortunately, here we are a year later. The crowd control issue has still not been fixed, and according to some of my friends who have been playing the entire time, as far as the rated player versus player combat is concerned, it's been in pre-season for 6 months now. The season still has not ended. I guess they were focused on their free-to-play model. Unfortunately, the PvP is not a big attracting factor here. However, the story mode is. Now, one other change that my guild absolutely demanded that BioWare eventually gave into was the ability to customize your UI. And as you can see here, I am able to use my UI interface modifier to move and do whatever I want with my user interface. But that's about the gist of it. Not a whole lot's changed since the time Star Wars: The Old Republic came out till now. They've made some improvements, but the free-to-play model is actually a detriment to the game. While it is fun, and if you're looking for something you can do very, very casually, and you're not looking to spend any money on it, sure, go ahead and pick it up. If you're looking to play Star Wars: The Old Republic again, and you're looking to do something more than extremely casual play, you're going to want to go ahead and resubscribe to the game, because you're just going to lose money on your Cartel Coins. That's about it for this review. To give my final determination, I would say if you are a player who used to play and are returning for player versus player combats, don't bother. If you are a player who's never played before and want to check out the game, it is a great game to check out. If you are a person who is interested in player versus environment, it is still a good game to check out because they did eventually get that part of the game fixed. This has been Anbraxas. I hope you guys have enjoyed the review. I hope this answers some of your questions. If you have any more, feel free to leave them in the comments below.